Hi, I'm Jim McCarthy, the CEO and founder of Goldstar and Stellar Live. Today, we're going to be talking about incredible tragedy and how to transform that in your business into innovation and new possibilities, specifically in the live entertainment industry and the transformation into online events. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? The truth of the matter is the pandemic was truly devastating for many businesses and still is. While for others, like Amazon, it's been an amazing time of growth. But what about the companies that were in industries that should have just died, but instead they actually found a way to thrive? What did they do that the rest of us can learn from? Well, stay tuned, because that's actually where we're going on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Find out more, you can simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our other podcast, Curiosity Bites. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how can we bring people together who completely disagree? This is exactly what your heart, your mind, and even your soul have been craving. It's your chance to sit in on some really intense and fabulous conversations with the world's most interesting people. We're talking about philosophers, quantum physicists, neuroscientists, astronauts, multi-Grammy award-winning entertainers, and a vast array of people, and some of whom you might not naturally agree with, who you will honestly find truly fascinating. Simply go to dovbaron.com and find out how you can sign up for and sink your teeth into the delicious Curiosity Bites. As always, you can find both of our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever it is you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant. So please, whatever you do, go over there, wherever you tune in from, and do us a favor. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we are honored and grateful to be served by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also listen to us via Google Home or Alexa by simply saying play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Today, more than ever, business must be innovative and agile. But the truth of the matter is, those are words that are thrown around without much meaning all the time. They were thrown around before the pandemic, and they're still thrown around. However, real innovation, I'm talking about real innovation, and agility means taking a crappy situation and transforming it into something people not only want, but will happily give their hard-earned money to get. The COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating to many businesses. However, as we begin to sort of emerge from the pandemic, the question is, will you be running as fast as you can to go back to normal, or will you have discovered a way to be more efficient, more effective, and in demand? Well, that's what you're about to find out from our guest today. Our guest today is Jim McCarthy. Jim started his career in e-commerce business back in 1997. He has almost 20 years experience in the live event business. Now, if you just for a second think about that, that might have been a bit of an awkward business to be in. He has sold over tens of millions of tickets to millions of people. He co-founded TEDx Broadway and co-founded Goldstar Events and Stellar Tickets. He's the CEO of both of those companies. His current mission is to enable artists and organizations to create high quality online content, helping them to find success in this new era where online events are transforming the entertainment landscape and the educational landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome Mr. Jim McCarthy.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you. That was quite a welcome. No, what a crowd. I love it.
You gotta have a big crowd for you, man. Absolutely.
Exactly. It's great to be
I'm
here.
really glad you could be with us. I know it took us a long time to get here, and I apologize for that. There's a long lineup. But it's, when we spoke last time, it was, we were a few months into the pandemic. Your hair was shorter. My hair was longer. Things have changed. So let's start. Before we get into all that, one of the questions I always like to ask my guests is, in this world where everybody claims to be an influencer, who is somebody who's had a great level of influence on you that we might not know, we might not think of, may not automatically come to mind, who's had a real impact and influence on you as a leader?
I think that Herb Kelleher, the former CEO and one of the founders of Southwest, is one of the most powerful influences on me as a leader. He's not with us anymore. And what's interesting about Herb is that I think it's really time for a rediscovery of Herb Kelleher, because he used to be somebody you heard more about maybe 10, 15 years, 20 years ago.
Exactly.
But his style, his approach, just his whole way, I think would be very, very current and right for today. But I think he's been a little bit forgotten, and it's time for Herb Kelleher to be recognized again. He was a wonderful leader. He had a focus on people. He was one of the first big company CEOs to say, you can't put the customer first because you have to put the team first, and then the team will take care of the customer, and just in so many ways. And they just decade after decade delivered value, delivered success in that area. So I think, and not only a warm human being, everyone loved him. So many great stories, so many great thoughts. Herb Kelleher has had to me, he was maybe nearly the perfect CEO, as close as you could be anyway. And I think it's time that his philosophies and his way of looking at things is brought back a bit.
So in that context, is it the key focus for you in recognizing him? Is the key focus in that he put his internal stakeholders first, meaning the corporate culture and the people who work for him first, before financial stakeholders, or even before the customers? Is that what it is? Is it the people first?
It's part of it. It's a recognition that there's a couple of things that I really loved about his style. That's one of them. And it's not to say that you don't. The ironic thing, of course, is that they delivered to their customers in ways that their competitors didn't even come close to.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
Just year after year, just outpaced their competitors on that front and on the financial front, because they put a lot of emphasis on, the right things when it came to the team. And beyond that, it was just the sort of simplicity and duration of vision that he had. Mm-hmm. For decades, where Southwest had one type of airplane and they had one very clear focus in their business, and everybody's action throughout the company was directed at really nailing that and really doing that thing again and again. And they had a lot of temptations along the way to deviate and to do other stuff, and they kind of stuck with it, and it paid off, and it paid off, and it paid off, and it paid off. So I think it's a bunch of things, and I think in part, there were other things. This is a funny story that I think has been lost, but there was some dispute between Southwest and some other company, and it was going to go to a lawsuit, but instead Herb Kelleher offered to arm wrestle the CEO of the other company. And he was, I think he was 65 at the time. So, it wasn't like he was some, macho dude who just couldn't wait to prove how strong he was. To his credit, the other company CEO accepted, and all the employees came together and they did this whole like WWE wrestling style event and literally settled the dispute between the companies that way, and it ended up being a very positive outcome. But those are the kinds of things that it's hard to replace that kind of.
But that for me, what you just said there, is exemplary of the human side of leadership, which is often lost, particularly in a litigious environment where everybody is wanting to sue everybody for sneezing in the wrong direction. And instead, here's somebody who stepped up and said, let's be humans about this. Let's be playful about this. Do you think, I mean, that's an older story, I know, but do you think that that's possible today? Do you think that we've lost not only that part, but do you think that it's like we've gone so ingrained? I mean, we live in this polarized leadership world where everybody's trying to be right and making the others wrong. Can we even go there anymore? I mean, I think you're right. We got to go. We need to go there. But do you think we can? That's my question.
Well, I actually, part of the reason that I think Herb Kelleher's due for a comeback is that I believe that younger adults than you and me are more interested in that kind of shift. If there's an opportunity for a shift in the world in that way, it comes from the people who are maybe under 40 today, who I think are thirsty for that kind of thing and more open to it perhaps than people our age or older. So I'm constantly made optimistic by the value set that younger adults are bringing to the table these days. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity, a lot of space, for that possibility in the future.
I love that.
Don't you think? When you encounter younger adults?
Couldn't agree more. I think we definitely need a lot more of that. I think we need a better sense of humor, personally. I think we need a hell of a lot better sense of humor in the whole world, but particularly in leadership. And I think we've lost a lot of that because of this, again, political correctness, cancel culture, polarization, and everybody's a bit on eggshells. And I understand that. But at the same time, if you can come at it from a place of humor, I've got lots of people who are friends of color and we goof around, we say things that are not politically correct. I have friends who are hardcore Republican and a hardcore left, and, they're my friends. I can still have friends with them. And it's almost like you're not allowed that anymore. So I will say things to my Republican friends that are politically completely incorrect. And the same to my left friends that are politically incorrect. And nobody's offended because we're playful. We're not looking at it as in, oh, how can I cancel you? Or should I sue you? I think we need a lot more of that, don't you, Jim?
Yeah, well, I think when you're funny, or when you can be funny, you get to say a lot more. It kind of reminds me of why there was a court jester, for so long. That guy had to be funny in order to have that job, right? He could say things that nobody else could say, but it better be funny.
Yeah, and actually, if you look at history, which I'm a bit of a study of that, and particularly in the context of court jesters, what people don't know is that court jesters in the movies they're nobodies, they're sort of throwaways, but actually they were often in line for the throne because they could speak the truth to power in the way no one else could. And that, interestingly enough, because you're from the entertainment world, is exactly what comedians could do.
Yeah.
Comedians spoke truth to power. My favorite of the 70s and early 80s of that was Bill Hicks. One of my favorite American comedians spoke truth to power in ways that nobody had ever done. And a lot of that is kind of gotten diluted, and it's kind of sad for me. I'm cheering on the comedians to come back with their satirical, punch it in the nose, say shit no one else says stuff. I mean, we need that more than ever. I think
it may be that
comedians more than ever in politics.
I think the function of that is really important, as you're saying. And I think it just may be that they're finding their way to a new way of doing that. I think that the achievement that has been made by some of the stuff, and maybe sometimes it goes too far, but the thoughtfulness about other people is important. That is important, and it's something that as we were growing up was underdone. I think we weren't thoughtful enough, in general as a society about people. But I think there's a path, through this to something else on the other side that still allows us to have people who can look at things from that different point of view and help people to confront, the truth through humor. I certainly hope so.
Well, I think the pendulum has swung too far, but it always swings back. You're absolutely right. Now, last time you and I spoke was right at the beginning of the pandemic, and just sort of to give everybody a bit of context, because who knows when they're listening to this, but March 13th, 2020, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Canada was the first G7 leader to self-isolate because Sophie, his wife, was tested positive for COVID. Donald Trump declared a national emergency in response to the pandemic. The pandemic caused a massive, huge disruption to sporting events calendar. So those were canceled, and that was actually more of a disruption than anything since World War II. So sports were gone. Later on, the Summer Olympics were canceled, and shortly thereafter, Broadway, the symbol of New York resilience, shut down. And as I remember from our previous conversation, you emailed, I think you said 10 million people. Right, that's a big email.
Something like that,
to
yeah.
say, don't do business with us.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that moment.
Yeah.
Because that's a sinkhole in your business, right? Where you, in the context of who you are business-wise, by all presumptions, should have just disappeared. You should have fallen in that sinkhole and disappeared. So talk to us about that moment first, and then we can evolve forward.
Yeah, it was it was something I don't think many people contemplate the possibility of what we went through as a business, and not just Goldstar, but the live entertainment business as a whole.
Yeah.
We at Goldstar, I started to get, semi-concerned about COVID in early February. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it was very serious in China already at that time. And so we started to track the number of people that were writing in on a daily basis, asking questions about it. And at first, the number was very low. We might not even get one in the course of a day. And then, but I asked the customer service team to tally them and just share that information with me every day. And then I started to see it go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16. And I said, oh, I know the shape. I know what kind of curve this is. This is a geometric curve. And so, yeah.
This is an Elon Musk rocket, and it ain't coming back down for a while.
That's right, at least not for a while. So we really started to brace ourselves for what was coming in mid-February. But, it's like I've said, if you're strapped, if you're tied to the train tracks and you can't get off, it doesn't matter how much warning you have. We did everything we could to prepare for what we were going to need to do. But along about the time that the NBA canceled or suspended its season, and Tom Hanks announced that he and Rita had gotten COVID in Australia, and Trump announced the flight ban, we realized, that this is just, it was really what it was. It was like, we should cancel all the shows this weekend. We should cancel all the shows next weekend. We should cancel all the shows, and so across the industry, the live entertainment industry, everyone's going like, oh yeah, we have to cancel everything. And literally the buying went from 100% or normal or whatever to 0% in about 36 hours.
So I just want people to grasp that, because you're in the ticket business for live events.
Yeah.
You've got whatever you've got, hundreds of millions of tickets you've sold over the years. And then suddenly you have to actually announce, don't go to shows. Because you said in the email, you're saying to people, this is going to sound crazy.
Yeah.
Don't buy tickets.
Well, what I said was, the first line of this email was, I can't believe I'm telling you this, but don't go to any live show. I don't want you to go to any live shows right now. And I think it was that realization that there's just no way around it, and there's no quick out. And this is something I want to just take, if I can, take 30 seconds to talk about the people of the live. I'm getting a little choked up, to be honest. Good. The response was so powerful, but we knew as an industry that it was going to hit us the hardest. I heard about people talk about, oh, we took a 25% dip in our sales. And I'm like, I dream of a 25%, across the, oh my God. We knew we'd be the hardest hit, perhaps, of any industry, and that we'd be the last ones out.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So first to go and last ones to come back.
And the deepest end,
dive,
right?
Yeah.
And that was something that, I think we all realized. I think there were those who thought, oh, well, maybe it's 3 months. And I kept thinking, and I kept telling people, like, what makes you think we'll be out of it? Like, what could happen to get us out of this in 3 months, And it was this sort of more wishful thinking. And I think that all went away.
Yeah.
And people started saying, well, we have to deal with the fact that this is going to be 9 months, a year, 18 months. We don't know, but it's going to be long. And so, that was just the sort of realization
that,
that, like,
talk to us about that realization, and you just talked about Herb Kelleher and Team First. So what was that? How did you broach that with your team? Because I know, because you and I had talked about it, that for a while, a lot of companies were kind of in denial.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you had to bring this up to your team.
Yep.
Talk to us about what that was like for you, to all of your team, and how were they?
I took the approach, and all of us on the management team were in complete agreement that the approach was as much candor as possible, and that was basically complete candor, in the sense that I made no secret of the fact that the first thing we had to do was we had fortunately only a small layoff, but furloughs and pay cuts for everybody around. We were determined that we would keep everybody's health insurance current, and some people had deeper furloughs than others, and that was very tough. But it was very clear that what I had to communicate was, normally you go through your normal business life, trying to figure out how to grow, trying to figure out how to climb that next hill, trying to figure out what's on the horizon. And then you switch modes. And I said, look, here's where we are. We are in a mode where our goal is to survive.
Yeah. There's no growth, thrive. It's just, can we keep breathing? Just
for now, right? Like, my whole thing was like, we just need to, it's kind of like, you're in a car accident, your first job is to just absorb the shock and pick up the pieces, right? Mm-hmm. And that process took a while. And so as a leader, I think you should not try to, and I never tried to say, no, it's going to be all right. I mean, I did say I believed we could overcome whatever came our way.
Sure.
But I didn't make any, and Richard's here, he was witness to this. I never didn't make any bones about the fact that this situation is I don't even know how to explain the depth of the crisis here, right? This is a total crisis. This is 100% shutdown for possibly, a year or two. And so I don't think a leader has any choice in that situation but to be very human and very direct in that way. And that's what I tried to do. I tried to just help people understand this is not like anything that we've seen or prepared for. Nobody really prepares for this kind of crisis.
I don't know that you can.
Yeah.
But what was that like for you personally, emotionally, to have that conversation? Because
the conversation about the reductions in the staff, and that was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. It was on March 13th, the same day that I sent the email. It was really something that we had no choice, but it was one of the most challenging conversations that I've ever had to have with people, because we're tearing down a big part of what we've built over a long period of time. Mm-hmm. And with people that we know and love, that we work with every day and that we care about. Yeah. And there's just no gilding that lily, there's just no, I didn't try to make it, I tried to manage the morale and the feelings of the people leaving and the people staying, but at the same time, without trying to sweeten it up at all, because there really isn't any way to do it. So that, from my point of view, and I really felt a very strong sense of duty about it. And the duty was that I had to do it. I had to do it right. I had to take care of people as best I could. So I I think it was really only a bit later that my personal feelings about it really kind of came pouring out, which was, a kind of emotional exhaustion and everything. But before that, I just was driven more by a sense of duty.
Right.
So I just said, look, if I'm not ready for a leadership challenge, this is what I've been trained to do. This is what I've been learning my whole career, is how to communicate and lead in bad situations and good. If I'm worth a damn, if I'm worth my salt, then I can do it in hard times as well as easy times. I spent a lot of time, I imagine other people did as well, but I spent a lot of time in those first few weeks of the pandemic thinking about the kinds of challenges that other people have faced in the past. And leadership challenges. I know your audience is really interested in the question of leadership, right?
Yeah.
The leadership challenges faced by, you pick it, right? Like so many people at the very high level, or at even the lower level during World War II, for example, or other brutal times in history, where I just felt my obligation of the bitter cup set before me was nothing compared to what they went through, and they did it.
Absolutely.
They did it.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I have to do it. This is just a small task, for me, relative to what they did. And we've lived in a time of pretty amazing stability.
Yes.
In the general time that you and I, for example, it's been, there's always ups and downs and good things and bad things and whatever, but what we've been called upon to do as leaders in our societies has been relatively light duty compared to.
Yes, no doubt about it. So let's sort of expand that a little bit, because you're at this moment of devastation. Businesses shut down. You've had to announce to everybody you're furloughed, or in some level anyway. And the business you have built is completely and totally reliant upon something that no longer exists.
That's right.
Okay, so as I said in the introduction, this is a point where businesses disappear. They go, it's not our fault. We had no control over this. We got to pack it up and go home. You've heard me talk about this before, that when I fell off the mountain and I got smashed to pieces and all that happened, there was a moment there where I went, okay, I can just accept this. And it was very seductive, even to me, who was an incredibly driven person, to just throw in a towel. It was seductive. It was like, okay, it's not my fault.
Right.
So I can be okay with being a victim because it's not my fault. But you didn't do that. I mean, I'm sure you had moments of feeling that way. Maybe I'm wrong, but you didn't do that. And as I was saying in the intro, you've reinvented, you've transformed. Talk to us about that moment of potentially, not necessarily true, but potentially feeling like I can throw in the towel, or going the other way.
That whole thing about throwing in the towel is really true. And I think, and I would never criticize somebody for a decision in that way. I would just say, when I talk about entrepreneurship, or when I talk to entrepreneurs, and these words came echoing back to me in that moment, was, entrepreneurs that succeed, and this extends beyond entrepreneurs, they tend to recognize when they're being baited with a socially acceptable excuse for not succeeding.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, there's just no way to criticize somebody when the facts are such that, well, okay, these things happen. And that's why I'm not about making people wrong, in those situations. Your physical situation is one where, like, of course, I mean, it's just hard to the thing that happened to you. It's just one of these things where, yeah, sure. And then the alternative choice that can be made is to say, okay, that's true, but I don't necessarily accept that. And right. I guess you have to decide. I mean, there's been people that, let's say the business was 3 months old.
Mm-hmm.
maybe it would have been an easier choice to say, you know what, terrible timing. Let's just, call it a wrap and move on, right? But that wasn't the calculus that we went through. And again, I think there's a word you don't hear very often, but the idea of duty is really strong. It's like this is my responsibility,
Yeah.
And I say mine, but I mean I look around and think about the people who are here, and I'm in this again, the same thing across the industry where people felt a responsibility to make something function out of it. Maybe it's just perverse. Maybe it's just wanting to be able to say whatever, even something like this isn't gonna stop us. You know what I mean?
I think that's part of the A-type, as I said. I think it's part of the A-type. I think it's part of the entrepreneurial spirit. I think it's part of all those things.
Yeah.
But you get hit hard enough.
Yeah.
That you've hit the canvas 7 times. That 8th time getting up is kind of hard, and particularly if what hit you was Mike Tyson of crises called the coronavirus, right? The pandemic.
Yeah.
So talk to us about now the transition, because you've transformed your business into something else altogether. Not saying that you won't come back in the other form as well, because I know that that's part of the deal, but you've managed to not only stay afloat, but transform your business, bring people back on. Walk us through how you got to that, when, as I said, it would be even at the mindset level to throw in the towel. The mindset level is, okay, well, we can try and survive, but we're not going to do anything. We're just going to try and that's that, as I talked about in the intro, that's that part of people who I keep slapping for saying, well, when things get back to normal, normal's done, right? You made that decision. Talk to us about that transformation.
But do you mind if I talk about normal for a second?
Sure, please.
My worst fear is that we go back to where we were in March of 2020.
I couldn't agree more.
And I could probably write a whole essay on this or bore people to death with even more than that. But I think there were some things that really, really needed to change, and they still do need to change. And
absolutely,
the way I look at it, Dove, is that we've paid a price. We should get something for that price.
Yeah.
In terms of society being better and a lot of things. And I'm optimistic that there will be some things that emerge from that. It's going to be hard to know for a while, but I hear a lot of people talk about certain habits or things that they did or ways of being that they don't really plan to go back to, and others where they do. Like, I can't wait to just sit in a bar and shoot the breeze with friends for a couple of hours. And
that would be nice.
Well, that'd be nice. So yeah, going back to normal shouldn't be the goal. I think going back to and appreciating the things that have been taken away from us in a new and fuller way is what I want to do. But I also want to leave the pre-pandemic world behind in so many ways, because it was not a well world in a lot of ways. Not a well world in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I fully agree. And that's why I keep saying to people, stop trying to go back to normal. Nothing in evolution goes back. It only goes forward.
You're so right.
The only thing you can do is pay attention to, okay, let's put, again, it's philosophical. It's not real. The philosophical is, what if this was for a reason? Okay. Like, so, for me, how many people died at the hands of police who were people of color before? It happened all the time, all the time. But it happened during the pandemic to George Floyd on camera. And suddenly there is an uprising. And I wrote about it and did videos about it. And I said, I'm afraid. As a white guy, I'm afraid. And it was a mislead. I said, but I'm not afraid of what you think I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that we'll go back to normal at some point, and all this will get just brushed under the rug again. We need it to be different, and we need leadership to be different. Not just Black Lives Matter. We need leadership to be different. We need business to be different. I'm starting a movement with a lot of my friends around not only conscious capitalism, but compassionate capitalism. Like, I want you to make money. I want you to do well, but let's stop not looking at the homeless people and saying, it doesn't really count because I'm not there. That
Yeah.
gap is widening, and you're going to fall through it if you don't move to compassionate capitalism. Me too, all of us.
Yeah.
And so, I'm with you fully,
Yeah,
Jim.
man.
We've got to get on board with this.
I love that, man. I second that. There's just no, there's, if you're a capitalist, capitalism is great. Capitalism has done so much, for people, and yet it can also be not great, and I think if even if you are a capitalist, and even if you want to get super rich yourself, which is perfectly valid pursuits, good pursuits, even potentially, do you really want to live in a world where you cordon yourself off with your little bit of with your wealth, and the rest of society just kind of degrades? And I don't think there might be an audience for that somewhere, but I don't think many people want to sign up for it. It takes leadership, as you say, to point towards something else and say, like, this is possible. Something else is really possible. And so I couldn't agree more, man. The worst thing would be if it all just kind of, yeah.
We've got to stop doing it in the way that we've done it, and it's got to evolve. It's not good or bad. It's what's the evolution, right? People say, oh, my parents were good. No, they weren't. My parents were bad. No, they weren't. They were both. What's the evolution of their parenting? If you're going to have kids, you need to evolve that. Well, it's exactly the same with capitalism. Is it good? Yes. Is it bad? Yes. What's the evolution of it?
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
There's an evolution here, and it's our responsibility as leaders to take that on and say, all right, how am I going to do that in my business?
Yep.
What is my 1% shift that can make a massive difference in the world, particularly if we come together to do it? So now let's talk about the transformation, because this is important, Jim.
Yeah.
Because as I said, there's a lot of people watching, listening, who are going to be saying, I'm still struggling here, and I don't know how to transform it.
Yep.
And as I said, I really wanted to have you on as a guest because your business should have been devastated.
We're the poster children for getting hit hard by the pandemic. Yeah.
Clear. Right?
There's no,
like, he's out. He's done.
There's not many businesses that have bragging rights over us in the live entertainment business for how bad it's been. We're right about at the top of the list.
Right.
I'll tell you. So the first thing we did, I think it was even in the same email that I told you about earlier. It might have been a couple days later, but if it was any later, it was just days later. We turned the website and the app, which normally sell tickets, into a platform for donations to the venues and organizations that we normally sold tickets for.
Wow.
So we sent a message to all of them and said, look, if you want to just put a kind of donation page on our site, we'll put it up, it'll be completely free to you to use, and we will market your donation things as though they were events that were for sale for us. So
they were donating to who?
To, for example, if it was a nonprofit theater that normally sells tickets on Goldstar, or a charity on behalf, whatever. So they would put anybody who was legally allowed to would put something on Goldstar that said donate to the such and such theater. Right. And we were promoting that as in the same way that we would. And we helped a bit in that way. There was definitely some money raised and support provided. But more than anything, what we were thinking and what we said was, and we said this in an email to our venue partners, whatever happens, we're here as always to help you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's it. So I will say that for the first month or two of this, we didn't have a plan so much as we had orientation. Mm-hmm. And this goes back to maybe the idea in a way of duty, but also just like what should we do? And that orientation was, we're still here to help venues and producers of shows succeed, and of course to take care of the ticket buying customers in every way that we could. So that was the orient. So talk about transforming. I think it's sometimes too early to talk about transforming. You can't. If you're currently in the car accident, it's not the right time to start thinking about how you're going to drive more safely in the future or whatever, right? That is too early. So for a while, it was really just the thought that we're going to figure out what we have to do to survive. And if we don't survive, it won't be from lack of trying. We'll have tried everything we can. And then secondly, our orientation is going to be to help, because we were in an industry where all of a sudden everyone's in crisis, like literally everyone. Try to imagine that, like whatever industry you're in, suddenly everyone in your industry is in crisis of an extreme kind. Right. So, we did the donation thing. As if nothing else, it was a gesture that I think people thought like, well, that's something, right? Like they did that. They didn't sort of go hide. We didn't go hide. We started to do a series of what we call expert chats, where we would bring people on. We would do sort of format, sort of like this. It was live. Yep. And we would say, we would bring somebody in who knows about managing your donors and keeping them on board, even though you've gone down, right? Like thinking about how to plan for returning to all the different things. So every couple of weeks, we would have somebody else in and just open it up to our partners and say, come and listen. This could be really helpful for you. We started doing that. We're still doing that. We also began doing what we call the return readiness survey. So we're surveying the Goldstar audience, which is a frequent ticket buying audience, twice a month, and asking them how willing are you to go to live events right now? Oh. Right? 0 to 100 scale, 0 meaning hell no, 100 meaning anytime, I'm ready to go right now. And sort of where are you on that? So we've had twice a month, we've had a return readiness score that we've been publishing. We do a broadcast with it, and we put it out in various ways since May, so you can see where the trends have gone. The good news is, when we're talking today, each new survey is a new high in the history of the survey. So we know we're on our way back out. We just started doing things like that, and people were beginning to do these online events.
Right.
And they said, can you sell these online events? And we said, sure, we'll sell it, whatever you got, right? So we started selling these online events. And at first, and you'll remember this, the entertainment events in, say, March, April of 2020 were pretty basic. Yes. They were a lot of what people call robe shows, people in their robes, or sofa shows, whatever you want to say.
Exactly, yeah.
And they didn't, people weren't charging for them, or they were doing, $5 or pay what you want kind of thing.
Live from my bathroom.
Exactly right. And they weren't very good. And I remember thinking at the time, these aren't very good. And so I wasn't super bullish on the idea, because the implementation originally was just not great. But then in April, every now and then we would see a sales surge on one of these events that we were selling. They're not huge, but we would sell, a few hundred, let's say, tickets to something. And I would say, let's look at that, right? So every time I saw a sales surge, what I saw was an event that was being produced, right, and where thought was being put into it. And perhaps not coincidentally, they were charging more than a trivial amount of money for it, maybe $15, maybe $20, maybe a little bit more. We noted that. We noted that, okay, that's happening. And that began to evolve. And it got clearer and clearer that people were producing things that you would watch regardless.
Right.
Forget about the pandemic. They were producing things that were just worth watching. Yes. Great things that were worth watching. And that's when we went into a pretty significant and very careful and thoughtful strategic planning process. And this is in April of last year, where we considered, the things we could and things we couldn't control. And I have a whole approach to this that I borrowed from various people over the years. But, the approach is to say, what are the scenarios in front of us in terms of things we can't control? So in this case, it was optimistic timeline on the pandemic, base timeline on the pandemic, and pessimistic timeline on the pandemic.
Right.
And then you look at that and you say, what are my choices? Right? You think about I don't know, I hope this is of interest, but this is how we dealt with this is how we arrived where we arrived. Every viable choice that you can define, you have to lay out, and you have to, including, by the way, one of the choices that we laid out was kind of, turn it off, go down to the bare minimum skeleton crew, and then, come back at some other point. And then what you do, or what we did, was we laid out we told ourselves a little story of what would happen if we did each one of those choices in each of the three scenarios.
I see.
Right? So the shutdown idea, for example, how does that play in a very short pandemic scenario? Well, maybe in a short pandemic scenario, it's okay. You're offline for 3 or 4 months, and then you come back and, you can probably get most of the team re-engaged and nothing's all that stale and everything's maybe okay. In a medium case where maybe it's early 21 when you're getting going, it doesn't work very well at all, because you basically lose the whole team, you lose the attention of your partners, you lose the attention of your customers. In a long-term scenario, you're absolutely dead.
Yes, dead in the water.
So by choosing that shutdown option, basically we're just rolling the dice that the pandemic was going to be very short. In order for that to be a good choice, and this is how we approached the strategic planning of this, in order for that to be a good choice, the most optimistic form of the thing we couldn't control at all had to come true. Otherwise, it was a bad decision. Right? So then as we went through and looked at different choices, that was what happens if it's short? What happens if it's medium? What happens if it's long? Because you want to make a choice in that where you are making a good decision almost regardless of what happens in the things that you can't control. Right. So that's my take. I've borrowed it from other people, but that's my take on how to approach the strategic choices that you're facing. And what we saw was that if we could make a serious play in the world of online events, that in the short term, it would be something that would have value. But if there was a short pandemic, we'd be back in business on the Goldstar side, and we'd have the opportunity to keep pursuing the other one. In the other two scenarios, we'd have more time to develop that concept. It would produce some revenue. It would keep the team engaged. It would allow us to maintain or even build our relationships with our partners and our customers and all of that. And in the long scenario, well, it might be the only thing keeping us alive, right? So that was a good decision across all of the scenarios of the things that we couldn't control.
Right.
And we also felt that the market really was there. We were seeing it evolve. So and so then on May 6th of last year, we committed to the Stellar project and started building the thing that is now currently known as Stellar,
which is the online events. And you and I had talked about this previously. The indicators, I think that when we get caught off guard and we get, obviously this was a crisis, and when those crises happen, we know this actually from neuroscience, that the cortisol narrows the focus, and which is a great thing if you are trying to come up with a scenario. But if you get too much cortisol, it narrows the focus, so the only thing you can see is a shitty outcome.
That's right.
Not so great. So the thing about it, though, is that somehow you were able to do that. You were able to narrow the view in a positive way. And one of the things you and I talked about, which was, way back, that you had seen that the K-pop band BTS had done an online show, fully produced. So, there wasn't going to be a stadium. So, but they'd done an online show. Tell our listeners what happened, because, if I say to somebody who's listening or watching, okay, what do you think happened to live events? They died. So what do you think happened to bands like BTS, who were this K-pop band, who have this massive following around the world and go and do all these big stadiums around the world? What do you think happened to their tours? I think most of us would say, well, I guess they all ground to a stop. And you told me something that was like phenomenal and is a really great insight.
Yeah, well, so their in-person tours did come to a grinding halt. All tours were canceled, but they did a show in late May, that generated. I may have the number of views wrong, but the revenue was over $20 million for a single 90-minute show. They then did one later in the I think it was September, with 1 million buys and over 40 million in revenue. So they did entire tour revenue in single performances. Now they're BTS, right? Like they're the biggest band in the world. And so a lot of people say, well, I can't do that. And I say, well, you probably don't need $45 million to make a big difference either. You know what I mean? For one night's work. So it's the same kind of idea. What they did do was they leaned in to their fan base. They leaned into creating a great online show. It wasn't just a replication of, the tour that they had planned, right? It was truly in the new medium of an online event, and it paid off in a big way.
Yeah, but again, they, or not necessarily them, but whoever runs them, did the same thing that you did, which is to say, okay, this is done. What can it become instead?
Yes.
And I think that people have been sort of trying to work out, how do we get through this rather than how do we transform this? And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, Jim, because you, instead of, so many people have been trying to get through rather than trying to transform. I had a wonderful conversation with Ken Davenport, who's a big producer in Broadway.
Friend of mine.
I'm sure right?
Yeah.
And he did not come at it from how do we get through?
Mm-hmm.
He came through how do we transform? And the people I know in business generally, not just in your business, have had this mentality. How do we transform?
Yes.
And BTS team went, how do we transform? And, and they weren't doing a crappy little live from my bathroom.
No.
As you said, they did a full production. Yep. And you talked to me about how they were able to do things that they couldn't have done in a live.
That's right.
With switches and with close-ups and, so
and backstage access and all kinds of participation. And that's the thing. By the way, one of my first phone calls the next week in March after the shutdown was Ken. And I said, Ken, just calling to say hi, and we just talked for however long and commiserated, but also just like immediately just think, job one really is survival, but it's not just that. And by the way, I want to make the point that, like, I understand just wanting to get through, and some people are
of course
better positioned than others to say, okay, how do I kind of lean forward on this? So it's not, I don't want people to feel that, if they haven't made some great leap forward in this, that it would be a criticism, as much as I think it's just one of these things where in a way it's a mindset. So if you're talking about a business, right? I think part of it is, it's kind of like, do you ever remember the movie Heathers?
Yes.
Yeah. So at the end of the movie, they walk out of this building that blew up, and they should be dead, it doesn't matter the whole story. And Christian Slater says to Winona Ryder, now that you're dead, what are you going to do with your life?
Right.
And I kind of felt like that, now that you're dead, what are you going to do with your life? And I'm like, well, we get to kind of roll the dice here. We get to kind of, we're going to fight like hell, and do all, part of it is you have to, you have to say, like, okay, this really, really sucks, but that's just the way it is. You know what I mean? Like, so all the decisions about cash flow and cost reduction and all that stuff, you just have to face it, right? Like, right. I think that's part of it. And once you get to the point where it's no longer just a sort of, hey, well, under normal circumstances, these would be just chronically painful conversations. You're at the point where it's like, well, you just assume we're already out of here, right? Like, right. So now that you're dead, what are you going to do with your life? And I really felt like, in some ways, that's what happened to us and other people in the live entertainment business. The worst thing for me would be if people, and some did, and I think some took longer to get to this understanding than others, and some didn't. but to go like, oh, there's actually some stuff here that is opening up as a result of this.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm trying to get across here.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not criticizing anybody for not transforming.
Yeah.
Of course not. But what it is that even now, more than a year into the pandemic, and things are not fully open yet, and vaccinations are going out there, but we are in the brink of still, things are going to evolve. And you're either going to try and this is what I'm cautionary about with people, you're either going to try and go back to normal, or you're going to transform.
Yes.
And this is why I'm putting this forward to people. And this is why it's great that you're on now, actually,
Yes.
even rather than at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you can still transform.
Yes.
Because, there's still something else that can be created out of this. And yeah, okay, you may have to lick your wounds a little bit, and okay, but what is the transformation that can come out of this when you get up, and you can get up? So that's why I'm saying this. I want people to grasp that even when it comes back and, everybody's vaccinated and all the things are open, blah, 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 it's not going to be the same.
No.
So we're getting close to the end of the show, Jim, and I want to make sure that I want to ask you from a very personal point of view, what do you think is going to happen to the live entertainment business? Do you think it's going to come back in the way that it was? Or do you think that the virtual entertainment that you are now part of with Stella is going to be way bigger?
So I have so many things to say about this that we could probably go over time.
Right.
And if anyone wants to know more, there's plenty of ways to hear the things I've said about this. But I think I can get where you need to get with your audience in particular. You were talking about you can still transform. I'd actually up the ante on that and say, when it comes to online events, and interfacing with the live events industry overall, in 5 years, flashing forward 5 years, everybody will be doing them. And everybody will be there in one way or another. It's just a question of when you start and how good you get, and what gains or losses will be made by different people during that period of transition. Now, having said that, I think it's really important to say that there have been some who make this really false dichotomy either or thing about in-person events and online events. Complete malarkey. There's no reason to, it's like, well, I think the in-person experience can't be replaced by an online event. Of course not. Of course it can't be. Anyone who's thinking of online events as just a substitute for in-person events are people who don't really don't do the online event side of it well. Other people, and again, I think especially younger people who are more digital native and all that stuff, they go, yeah, of course. Of course, right?
Of course,
it's a no-brainer. The Twitch generation and so forth, like they get that there's a reason to be online live watching something happen right now. What hasn't happened up to now so much is that highly skilled event creators producing live stuff for online consumption hasn't really happened in great numbers until now, and that's going to continue forward. So the live entertainment in-person business is going to come back very strong. It's going to be a little uneven. And we don't know exactly when, and it's going to be, the regional differences, the genre differences, it's going to be quite uneven. But I think that by what I've said, and I think the facts continue to kind of bear me out on this, but we're going to have a very big November, December this year in the in-person business, just very big. Right. I think people are eager to get back into the venue, and they should. What's going to happen on the online side is that this is a tool that's too good to pass up. If you're in the live entertainment business, this solves some problems that have existed for thousands of years. Like you produce a great show, but only the 800 people or the 10,000 people in the room get to see it. That's not great, right? It makes the business model of live events kind of isn't great, right? Because it takes a long time to get to break even. And then as soon as things start to get really good on the profitability side, slam, capacity, toast. In order to go further, you've got to do another show, and new costs arise and all that kind of stuff. with online events, you can layer that on top, for example, with hybrid events.
Yes.
I think hybrid events are going to be really big. And then I would say there's also a whole bunch of new forms of online live events, some of which will have an audience and some of which won't, that just blow open the doors to audiences around the world. Now, that's something that from a financial point of view, from a reach point of view, from a marketing awareness point of view, and an artistic point of view, is too good of an opportunity for smart creators to pass up, and I don't think they will. One of the ways I put it is this. There's a bunch of things I could say, and you can ask me, what you want me to talk more about, but somewhere out there in the world is the world's greatest small theater, let's say, for example. I could give other examples, but let's just, will you agree with me that somewhere out there in the world is the world's greatest small theater?
Absolutely.
You may think it's one and somebody else may think it's another thing, but it's out there, right? In a good year, in a very good year, the world's greatest small theater probably has an audience of 40 or 50,000 people that see its work. The question is, does the world's greatest small theater deserve a bigger audience than 50,000 people?
Of course.
The answer is almost definitely yes.
Mm-hmm.
And even, definitely yes, right? And even in the most, aggressive, reduction of size of potential audience, cut it as many ways and as aggressively as you can, there's still probably 1 million people that should be in the audience of the world's greatest small theater. And yet 40 or 50,000 is a tiny fraction of that. Mm-hmm. Online events, really, if you care about access, for example, if you care about the health of the work that a theater or a music hall or something like that can do, then online events are the key to that. And the pandemic has absolutely kicked open the door that was shut to online events. So
I'm really excited to see what leaders interpret from this, because you may have been listening to this in the context of Jim being tied into the live entertainment business, but I'm really challenging people to look at this in the context of business and leadership, and where have you gotten rigid, and that you can really look at this in a different way.
So
Jim,
true.
this has been a fabulous show, and I really appreciate you being with us. We're already out of time.
Oh, well.
I want to make sure, though, before we finish, that you can tell our audience where they can find out more about you, about Stellar, about all the things that you're doing and the resources that you have available.
Well, so hopefully by the time you're seeing this, you can go to Goldstar and buy some great tickets to some in-person shows. Let's just put that out there as an that shouldn't be too long from the day that we're actually talking.
So we're recording. You might be listening to it, and everybody's back going to live events, and we're encouraging you to.
I think so. Go to Goldstar and buy some tickets.
Right.
But the other thing is, if you're in the live event production business, or you want to be, if you're a creator and you want to really find someone who can help you get to that next level, to really make a go of success in the online event world, whatever that might mean to you, contact us at Stellar. We love being involved with great creators. That's been I'll tell you, some of the most fun I've had in my career is being here for the birth of a medium, or at least the leveling up of the online event medium, and being able to kind of be involved with creators as they think through how to approach this. So that's what I'm really into these days. So if you go to Stellar, workwithstellar.com is one place you can go. Stellartickets.com is where you can actually buy tickets to shows that are available on Stellar, and there's always a couple hundred of those. You can find me on Twitter, Goldstar Jim. You can find me really anywhere. JimMcCarthy.info is a way to contact me directly, but really Goldstar, Stellar, find us. We can talk to you about your online event concept. We can give you a demo. There's just a million ways, and we'd love to talk to anybody who is excited about online events and help them be successful with online events. There's a lot to come.
We will definitely make sure that we post those links. And I will tell you, dear listener, that I have dealt with the Stellar team, work with them around some of the ideas that I had, and they are fabulous, incredibly helpful. And this is a new venue in a way that you've not thought about before, but it's not, live from your bathroom. This is a much greater professional way to do this. And I encourage you as a leader of a team, whatever your team is, maybe you should reach out to these guys and look at how you can bring your business into these virtual event environments. It's really exceptional. Again, Jim, thank you so much for being with us. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, remember that you can hang out with other conscious leaders. You can chat about this episode that you've been listening to or any past episodes by going into our LinkedIn or Facebook groups. Just look for Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. You see, it doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or a leadership strategist for yourself or for your organization, you can simply go to dovbaron.com, because unified meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can take a tragedy and turn it into an innovation, how you can transform rather than just getting through. There's still time, the days are early, and the doors are open. It's now up to you. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.